Imagine being trained on the moon, deployed for a combat mission on Mars, and then sent to the Ceres Colony in the asteroid belt. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Secret Space Program 20 and Back survivor Tony Rodrigues. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, interview portion of the show. We've got a very special guest. A couple of years ago, my guest was on the show when we were just on Blog Talk Radio, I believe, and we had a great audience reaction. He's got a really very different, very compelling, very powerful story to tell. His name is Tony Rodrigues. He's a 20-year tour experiencer. That means he went out into space for 20 years and came back. His consciousness was moved into a cloned body. He had a lot of experiences in different areas of space. We're going to get into all of that. He came back and somehow through an MRI, some of his memories came back to him that were supposedly wiped. I know this sounds fantastical and really out there, and this is new information for a lot of folks. So just listen with an open mind. We're going to have a great conversation. Tony's book that's out now is an autobiography. It's called Ceres Colony Cavalier because he was in Ceres, which is out in an asteroid belt way out in space. He's the co-creator of his own show now, Talks with Tony, which is a Patreon group focused on disclosure, consciousness expansion, and helping other people who are now coming to surface who have had similar experiences. So he hosts support groups, created a course for others who suspect they may have been involved in similar programs. So welcome back to Guys Radio, Tony Rodrigues. How you doing, Tony?
Hey, Robert, I'm doing great. That was a mouthful, man. What a long story. And I know that for somebody not familiar with the information, that a few things you said would be like a turnoff, or you know what I'm saying? It just sounds so fantastic, but it takes a long time to explain everything that happened. It was 20 years of my life. And then I came back to the same age I was taken, just the same night. And this is a phenomenon that's like pretty, I don't want to say it's widely accepted. Even in the ufology community, a lot of ufology is kind of pushed back against theory, but this is a technology that they're using. This is something that's real. They take people, they abduct them, they take them for a long time, and then put them right back only a few minutes after they were originally taken. So.
Well, let's take a half step back and the big picture. Right now, it seems like, Tony, that there's a lot of information coming out now about UFOs. There's a lot of disclosure. There's been a drip. You know, it used to be in some of the crazy magazines or newspapers you'd see at the checkout counter in the supermarket, then into the more mainstream. And it used to be in the back. And now they're moving more towards the front of the tabloids. But there's information about UFOs. There's government reports coming out. Are you surprised that this is happening now, even though it's still kind of a drip process with the overall disclosure movement?
No, I'm not surprised at all. It's they have to get in front of it because our technology, the astronomy, in particular, the astronomy technology is progressive. We got not only the James Webb, but many other telescopes that were designed years ago are going to have the ability to detect life on exoplanets. So the discovery of exoplanets is pretty young in when you look at all of astronomy. And so we're to the point where just a few more years, you don't have to be, the government's not going to be able to keep a lid on it. They're going to know about life out there through just astronomy alone. So disclosure, they're kind of got their back against the wall with disclosure. And I think they're just trying to mitigate with these reports. I'll tell you what's surprising about me, Robert. The thing that's very surprising about these reports coming out, because we just had a 1,500-page one couple weeks ago, and that talked about abduction phenomenon, people, unexpected pregnancies, radiation poisoning, on and on, for people that are having abductions, not sightings, but abductions. And this was a government this was the same exact report. So this is the U.S. government putting their stamp on it, and we got the Will Smith slap on. So all the news covered that. They did not cover the report that came out with the really shocking evidence, not just the Navy filming a UAP, or that they call it now, or not the Navy. The thing that was surprising the most is that no one batted an eye. These things were on the mainstream news, and everybody went, okay, and just moved on. And so nobody batted an eye. This is like groundbreaking. Our entire existence should be questioned because there are craft in the air that can outfly our best craft in the air. And so people, just that alone is, when you talk about in terms of national security, not only national security, but physics, but our sciences. You know, we trust our science. Look at, I mean, we just had modern science was on the hook for some very important issues recently that I'm not going to say specifically, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. Modern science was at the forefront of just trust us, we're the best, we're the smartest. And now they came out and said with these UAPs, we have no idea how they fly. We have no idea how to match their speed or their agility. We have no idea they were flying into at Mach speed from the air into the ocean and back out again on camera from an F-16, one of some of the best camera equipment available. So our science is, you know, there are bells ringing. There's a red flag there, and nobody's batted an eye. It's like nobody's put that together. We've been distracted so much that we don't. The average person, sadly, doesn't even care.
Mhm. It really is amazing. Now, you came to prominence kind of initially a couple of years ago when, as I mentioned earlier, you had what's called a 20 and back, and you were recruited against your will as a young boy, about 9 years old, into a program where you went into some different types of training, and you were taken away from your family, I guess, and then you were sent to different areas in the world, Seattle, Peru, to the moon first, and then back, and then out to Mars and Ceres. Now, this is going to sound like way out there for a lot of people, but let's see if you can you capsulize this for us? What actually happened to you when you were a kid? I know, let me preface it a little bit to make it easier. You didn't get along with a kid in school, and your sense is that something happened with the family where they decide to have you kind of taken out of the picture and against your will enrolled in this secretive program.
Right. So basically, and this is a testimony that's come forward from many others too, with kind of the same scenario plays out. Somebody that had access to these programs and we're talking about infrastructure in the solar system and Black government projects and corporations dealing with extraterrestrials and trading their access to their technology and actually infrastructure over the last 100 years that's built out into the solar system and nearby stars. So there are people among us, they're walking among us that know full well that this exists and have access or have served in these programs consciously and did not have their memories erased. There are many people in society in the United States that are fully aware of these programs. So somebody that had access to these programs, I went to school with his son and we did not get along. And you could say I bullied him, but we were rivals in the talented and gifted class. And he decided to teach me a lesson. And this is a common theme. We hear a lot of people I've worked with since I've gone public. I've had people reach out to me with similar memories. And I worked with a few thousand people, and it's a reoccurring thing that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's the big question. You were taken in the programs, you were abducted by aliens. Why? How do I get it? How did you do that? What'd you do? And in my case, and in many cases, it's not a blessing. It's more of a curse. It's a punishment. And I was taken to teach me a lesson. And I got to tell you that when I came back the next day, I was taken on a Thursday night, and I woke up in my bed Friday morning. It was one night, but I did the 20 years and all the way back to my life, and I was totally lost in my life that next morning. When I came back, I was a changed person. I had been through a great deal of trauma. I had been through slave labor, and I had that mentality that came back with me. So I didn't remember what happened. The memories were gone, but the emotional side effects were with me that next morning. I was a completely different person the next morning.
So for your, just for the sake of our listeners who are not familiar with you and your story and this type of thing going on. So what happened like with your parents and your family life? You were gone, bang, 20 years and you're back. Did they wonder where you were? Did you wake up in your bed then and you were 20 years older? How does that all work for the benefit? Go.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Because it's a very confusing thing.
Yeah,
so,
right.
And then I always say, I like to throw the disclaimer out there, if you go into surgery and get your pancreas worked on, you were in surgery, where the wound is, but you have no idea of what they really did. And so it was the same for me in this situation. So I know that I got the memories back later on. I have a great deal of memories. There's a long streak. There's a lot of different, it's like a perfect storm of how I got my memories back. I got the memories back. I know I was taken. I know I went and I came back. But how they did it is, there were some medical procedures. There was high technology involved. So how they did it is kind of a mystery to me. So I get asked that all the time. Where were your parents while you were gone? It doesn't make sense. I was taken. I believe that they had a form of cloning technology, and like they created a clone, and it was a mindless, and they have the technology to pull your consciousness, your awareness out of you and put it into a new body. That's part of their life extension technology. And they put me in the clone, and the clone lived for 20 years, and then they either sent it back in time, because time travel is a reality, and then killed it. And I woke up with my consciousness back in my original body a few minutes later, just a few minutes after the procedure. And then they put me back in, well, they ran me through a few other things, through the blanking process. And then I woke up in my bed the next morning wondering what had just happened. And it's a very important point to make, that if you think about this technology, what I'm saying in this regard, and you look back at all the old Betty and Barney Hill, if I'm saying they're right, you look at all the old ET sightings. Everybody says we saw an ET, the lights were on, there were lights, it was the craft, and then I blacked out and I don't remember. Also, I woke up and I felt different. I don't know what happened, but they did something. It was the same thing, but what I'm implying is those people may have been taken for much, much longer than they are aware of.
So there is consciousness. When the consciousness comes back, and if it's kind of like we're kind of relating to this like software, how do you know, or could they have edited your consciousness so you would remember certain things and not other things? Or was the blank slating part of that whole thing? Because it seems like everything's being treated like software, but is your consciousness really like software or not?
To a certain extent, they tried really hard. They knew. So there was a technology on the base during the return. The return was a long process. When I was done on Ceres Colony, they flew me back to the moon, and the process began, and it was weeks. But at a certain point, they had a device that could communicate with the future. So they could see probable timelines, because they could get it down, and they saw at a certain point that I was going to get my memories back later in life, and they had to get it down to a certain amount of probability that I wouldn't. And so they took me in, and I went through another round of the trauma mind control. They did a bunch of things to me, and it's detailed in my book. It's a long story. I don't want to eat it up, obviously, in our time, but it's detailed in my book how it worked out. And like I said, there was kind of a perfect storm of how I retained the memories, and really kind of resisted that system, because it's a system. It's very effective.
Just absolutely amazing. My special guest on Guys Radio is Tony Rodrigues, a survivor of the 20 Back program, amongst others. And I guess the next obvious question would be, why do you think you're being allowed to share a lot of your information with people now?
That's another great question. I think that it was timing. And, I don't want to get too far out. I don't want to scare people away, but I think that the space program, like I said, our society, the technology is as such, where even 15 years ago, the astronomy technology, you needed government funded. You needed that kind of level of technology to make a telescope that could find life out there. Pretty soon, it's going to be something that we can wheel out of a garage, that an enthusiast could just build themselves and put a telescope to the sky and be able to do the spectrometry. I always have a hard time with that word, but they'll be able to do that with just homemade stuff and see, for instance, methane in an exoplanet's atmosphere. Like, astronomy is progressing the same way that computers do, the same cars. Everything is progressing and we're at that level. So there really is no point in them killing off people like me that have come forward. And they've silenced people in the past. We all have seen it happen. And there have been people that came forward and made it quite far with being whistleblowers, only to mysteriously vanish or have untimely demises. So I think that it was a timing thing for one. For two, I think that they began fighting each other. And we've seen that really bubble up to the surface. I mean, everybody has to agree that in the last 5 years, the world isn't really what it was before those 5 years. The bar has been lowered greatly about everything across. What we're doing is we're seeing our controllers fight each other. That's really what we're seeing. When we're seeing the crazy things that are going on, and I don't even want to point a finger at it, but we all know that things are not what they used to be, and it's actually gone kind of off the rails. And I think it's because we saw the people in control, which are affiliated with extraterrestrial organizations that are also fighting each other for dominance, fight each other. And in that middle of that, they forgot about the little guy like me. That I got the bulk of my memories back after an incident in 2015, and I didn't start speaking publicly until like September of 2016. And since then, I think that they really let it go. And also, just in the last year, with all the censorship, we're starting to see the pushback. I'm just now starting to see the negative portrayal of my testimony. Like, there's been a couple of short videos like on TikTok and things where they cut up my testimony and make it sound really dumb, and it's got like 10 million views, all boom, just like that. So we're starting to see the mitigation of the information of the secret space program. We're starting just now. So it's kind of like they got back on track, and now they're getting up to business to guys like me on the fringe.
So let's pull it back. So you were taken, and you were before you were, you went through the 20. You were, I think, one of the things you mentioned in your book is that you were greeted behind a store or something, and two guys put you in a van. They gave you a shot, and the next thing you know, you're on your way to the moon. So tell us briefly your kind of the trajectory, where you went, how long you stayed, and why you went from place to place, because it's not a glamorous story by any means. You were to the moon, you came back, they taught you different skills. You were in Seattle, you were in Peru doing some nefarious things, and then you were kind of sold into the program. And then next thing you know, you're back to the moon, you're in Mars, and then Ceres, and then back again.
That's exactly right. And it's confusing, I guess. When I woke up, when they put me in the 20 years, when it started, I woke up in Southern California in a military trauma-based mind control program, in a military program, CIA program. I found funding. I found there's a paper trail. Then I lived for those years, like you said, to Peru and Seattle. I was trained. What happened was they were training me for specific tasks, and when I got less effective at the task, they would retrain me for a new one, because I was just taken and thrown in the program. I wasn't really groomed. Or, I wasn't supposed to be a Marine or something. So picking up where you said, like after Seattle, and again, during that time, I had no memory of my life. I had no memory of mom or dad. I had amnesia when I woke up, which is why I think it was a clone. That's the whole reason. Because I woke up with no memory of where it came from on day one, and had complete amnesia of my home, or my family, all of that. I had no idea. And then at the end of the 20 years, I had all those 20 years of memory. Then they put me back, and I woke up in my body again, a 10-year-old boy. And I had the memories of mom and dad and where I came from were all back. And then all the memories of the 20 years were gone. So it was as if I went back to my original body where the memories were staying. So that's really the leading reason why I believe the cloning aspect of it. They took me after Seattle. There were a lot of factors involved. They said, we're going to sell you to the military. And I would have been about 16 years old in that time, about 6 years after I was taken. And they took me and like you said, gave me a shot. And I woke up on a craft, on a large, probably triangular craft on the way to the moon. It looked like an airplane on the inside, with military personnel, a bunch of people in uniform, and was taken to a base on the backside of the moon. And they gave me many series of different surgeries, and they wouldn't. There was no briefing of what they were doing to me. There was no, we're taking you in to get this done. They didn't do any of that. They were ETs. They were in the base, working alongside military personnel from the Earth, and they were doing surgeries. And then they gave me another bout of not exactly trauma-based mind control, but a different form of training, where I basically, it was like they drugs and they put you in front of a television and like
Programming.
a computer programming, and they gave me programming, and it was about fight or flight response. It was not about combat strategy or how to load, clean your field, clean your weapon, none of that. It was about not running from the face of certain death. That it was fight or flight response. That's all it was. It was like movies with multiple choice and replayed over and over again for days and days. Then they had an operational test. They put that was the first time I saw one of the larger insectoids that are out there that are also, they have many of them indigenous on Mars. And there is indigenous life on Mars, and there's actually quite a bit going on there. And I was flown to Mars on another larger craft. And we went to Mars and we landed at a larger base that was underground, an underground city, like an underground hangar. And as soon as we got off there, I was put on a smaller transport, taken to a forward base. And it had to be, it had to be somewhere near the equator, because when we did do missions on the surface, it was warmer during the day, and it would get very cold at night, but it was, like in the 40s and 50s during the day when we would walk outside. And we did hiking missions, we did missions, and it was a experimental program to put boots on the ground that were not trained, not equipped, and not trained as well as the expensive soldiers that were alongside of us. So then we had a couple soldiers and 6 guys like me that were basically very minimally equipped and trained. And they were just trying to match the numbers of the insectoids that they were engaging. And the insects just had numbers on them. So, and then to get a fully trained Marine with all the armor and everything, they had to, it was expensive. It took a long time. So
Go ahead. No, I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead, Tony.
I just want to say that project failed. And what they had concluded was that the insects, which were smart, adapted to the tactics much faster than they were supposed to. They knew they would adapt, but it happened much quicker than what they expected. So they canceled the project. And again, I was all of a sudden, without a job.
So
I guess, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I think a lot of folks would ask, okay, Mars, I thought it was very cold there. Number one, did you have spacesuits on? With the insectoids, why were the forces you were with, what were they battling over? Was it about mining, mineral deposits, or why were they fighting?
I believe it was territory. I believe that they wanted to excavate, they wanted to explore into areas that the insects were indigenous, and the insectoids are very territorial. Like if you cross the line into their territory, they become aggressive. So, and they couldn't kill all of them. They were just had too, like I said, they said too many. So they were trying to figure out ways to get in there and excavate or just do scientific research. I don't know what they were really at. Really, it was classified. It was above me. We got a few briefings on what was going on there, but for the most part, I was kept on a need-to-know basis, and it was very little.
Now, so you saw the insectoids there, but you were on the moon prior to this, and you mentioned other ETs. What was your experience in the different types of ETs that we've all heard about? Like there's the Greys, and there's the Dracos, and there's the insectoids, and there's blue avians, and all these different types. Can you give us kind of a, overview?
So there have been other people that have come forward with the names. So one of the things that was successful that I can't remember is I have a hard time with names, street names, ship names, all, you name it, the names of the ETs, even though I remembered speaking about them and knowing the names. Like I knew the names, but it's just, that's part of the region of the brain. There were taller, look like grays, but they were whites. And other people that have come forward said that that's called the Sikaar race. And there were smaller, darker gray beings. There were small reptilian beings. They were all working under the same corporate structure or under the same organization. They were all like a, I don't know what to say it, like in Star Trek, they were all working together for the same federation. They were all in the same organization, many different species. There were insectoids, but I didn't see them. But they told me that there were insectoids working there as well.
It sounds like there's two sides to this. Like there's I don't want to say the good guys and the bad guys, but it sounds like from what you experienced and what I read, that there was a kind of the Nazi breakaway technology that went supposedly down to Argentina and Antarctica, and is working with some factions of government. And then there's kind of the other side that are kind of fighting them, and it's both on planet and off planet. Is that directionally correct?
That's pretty close. That's right. And you know what it is they're basically sponsored by different groups. There are many groups that I think the biggest misperception we have nowadays, even in ufology, is that it's very far away to get to that there's only 100 species that are interacting with us, or 200, or that, and that's it, because it's so far away that even when you get into space, you can't tell. That's not the case at all. When I worked on Ceres Colony Corp, we had access to pretty much the whole galaxy and other galaxies, and 18 or 19 other galaxies, which would lead to each galaxy opening up a portal to 18 more galaxies. So, and they could go to other galaxies and back home in the same day. So it's not, space travel was instantaneous. The science behind it was energy based. It was all based on the output of the power source of the ship that could create a portal, and then use natural portals to go to other galaxies. But what I'm saying is that they're not 900 species or 80 species. There are literally trillions of different sentient species that can travel to the Earth and can pass through here, and they are organized into groups, and they work together so that they stick up for it. Like, we can't just go into space and go flying around without a sponsor of a more advanced group to kind of protect us. And so what you've got is the moon base where I was at. The people that took me were part of a larger group, the Draco, the Orion group, and we have other people fighting that are part from some other group. We have the Federation of Worlds. There are many versions of that, and they run like governments. So they look bad on the surface, and they look good on the surface depending on what day you catch them. The Orion group admittedly doesn't see mankind as a worthy species, more of a subservient species. So we have our standing with them, and that's about it. And other groups want to see us really kind of grow up and advance alongside of them. So there are different philosophies in play. But that's pretty much the situation, is that in order for our government or factions or anybody to get into space and go to deep space, they have to have a sponsorship of one of these larger groups, or they'll just get steamrolled. They'll get taken. They'll just take your ship. You'll fly into the wrong system and some bad will happen. You have to have a form of sponsorship to go into deep space. And so the government, the Germans at World War II, that's what emboldened them to begin World War II, was that they made contact with these groups and got a sponsor and got into space. And so the United States was about 10 years later, they got into space, and they've been looking for an alternative ever since. And I got to think they found it.
Wow, just amazing. I have so many questions, so forgive me. The Ceres experience, then, that's in a different asteroid belt. What happened there? So you're in the moon, you got some training there, you had some surgery done, you did some fighting on Mars in your role, and then you were sent to Ceres. What is Ceres? What was going on there?
I love how you're getting through this quick. So there's a long story. It's a luxury. Now, the first time when I first met you and we did our show, I didn't have a book to direct people. I had to explain it all, and it's just so hard to do. The Ceres Colony Corporation is based primarily with Germans from post-World War II. So they went to Antarctica, and then they did go and they got jurisdiction of the Ceres asteroid. And Ceres, the dwarf planet Ceres, pronounced series like television series, but it's spelled Ceres, for anybody who doesn't know, is in between Mars and the asteroid belt. So it's not too far from Earth. There was about 250,000 people living there full time underground, in cities that were laid out all over the interior of the planetoid. And they had found infrastructure that was abandoned from some other species, had built a lot of the infrastructure there already. And the Orion group gave them jurisdiction so that they could go there and start a colony. And they immediately moved in and began converting it to more human-looking architecture. And there are, in fact, replica cities of European cities built inside giant caverns that were once, I believe, filled with water. They had water. There was a lot of water there. And they would empty water out of large caverns and then build into it. And there were places that looked just like Europe, just like a European city. There was rust, and it was aged when I got there, and I would have been there. Look at the timeline, 87, right around 87 to all the way till 2000 was how long I was when I that was the time frame that I was there. And I worked there on ships. I worked on an earlier ship that was a converted submarine for about 8 years. And then I worked on a trader, a cargo, a freighter, and I did cargo engineering for them. And we traded with ET races all over the galaxy and other galaxies. And we traded goods for tech and techs for goods and cargo. And
When you say
there was quite a bit that went on.
When you say there were other people there, 250,000 people, were that humans or just a mix of different?
Mostly humans, yeah. There were two other species that were there, but there were maybe a few thousand of them. Ultruan, like I said, I'm bad with names, but they were like a 7-foot, like elongated skull with long hair species, and they did engineering primarily. And then there was another race there that managed all the businesses. Like they were the managers. Like you went to a restaurant, there was a 9-foot tall being in the back that was doing the managing of the business. So they were all over the place. And then there were other species. There were many species that visited. So they were constantly courting other species, other groups, star system, other species. They were constantly courting them to come and visit and do trade with them so that they could advance their technology. All of the colonies in the solar system, and the Earth breakaway colonies, all of them are in a very desperate race to acquire technology, and the easiest way to do that is to trade with extraterrestrials, not develop it yourself. Mm-hmm. So they were all very that was totally the name of the game. It was not to seek out new life, new worlds. It was about acquiring new technology, period.
And then at that point, when you were done with that part of your mission, were you brought back then to Earth, to your body then? That was the end of your first 20 and back, or was that the only 20 and back?
That was the only one that I'm aware of, hopefully. And
so what happened?
Yeah, at the end of that, I unceremoniously, I had an officer walk me to a different part of the hangar bay. I showed up for work in the morning, got off the train, and went to go to my ship, into my entrance of the ship, and go to the mission briefing. And there was an officer waiting there, and he walked me for quite a ways to another hangar bay, and I got on a smaller disc, an older disc, and flown to the backside of the moon, and they began the return process to put me back. And eventually, like I said, that process was I lost track of time, but it could have been anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month of time that whole process took place. And when it was over, I woke up the next morning in my bed back in 1982. And how
old were you?
Totally bewildered. I was 10 years old. So it was the school year of 81, 82, and it was like originally when I got my memories back and I did, got my timeline figured out. I said 81, I was 9 years old, but what I realized is that it was in April of that year. So I'd already turned 10, and it was 1980, it was after New Year's. So it was April of 82. But I woke up, man, and I still remember thinking being excited. Once I figured it out, I thought it was a trick. I woke up back in my bed and I thought I'd been tricked somehow, and I didn't know why. I didn't have any memory of what happened. But I looked around and I was I had my toys on my floor. I had toys, the Stretch Armstrong and the Legos and all that. And I walked over to them and I started looking through them, and I went, I remember, I had the sensation of being gone all those years, but I didn't have the memories of being gone. It was the strangest feeling. It was the passage of time was still there to me. So that's another part of the phenomenon. I don't know how it works, man. I just don't. But I lived those 20 years first, and then came back and lived my years since then. It wasn't like back and forth, or I lived these years all the way and then got the memories back. It was like those years happened first. So however the tech works, I don't know.
Now,
but go ahead.
Okay, there's a lot. Let's just go back to the moon for 1 second, because I'm sure people are curious as to wow, people look up to the moon and there's romance and this and that. And I know we only see one side. The moon kind of goes around us in a way where it doesn't seem natural because it's not spinning. What is actually, from your estimation, going on the moon? What is the moon? Is it hollow? Is it what is it?
It's probably hollow. There was a lot. There were. I was aware that there were greater security clearances the lower you went, and there were catacomb-like structure of caverns. So one of the bases that we went to, I came back years into my service when I got to Ceres Colony, and I started working on a cargo it wasn't a cargo ship, it was an old submarine, it was an older ship. And about 4 years into that service, we went back and I volunteered to do dangerous missions so that I could hopefully get a promotion. We went back to the moon and we went inside a cavern and then down to another level that a lot of people were not even aware was there, and it had higher security clearance. And so the moon has, as you go deeper into the moon, there are different species there that are actually administering the things that are going on closer to the surface, and that's where the human bases are, is close to the surface. The one building at the very end, during that time, when, like I said, when they discovered the probability that I was going to get my memories back, they took me to another area, an office, and it was a corner office, and I could see the lunar surface. So it was a building that was on the lunar surface. I believe the trapezoid-shaped building that was on the lunar surface, and I could see out. It was dark out, but I could see the mountains in the back, in the distance. And so there's a lot going on there. The moon is an ideal vantage point for
us
controlling the planet, if that's what
Yeah.
you're after, if that's what you want to do. And tidally locked. So there's a lot of tidal locked bodies in space, which none of it makes any sense to me, but apparently, so over time that's what happens. But it's very convenient for them if you wanted to put bases, and in fact they can use radio signals and everything. We would never know. They can broadcast from the back of the moon. We would never ever know.
It's absolutely amazing. Well, Tony, you've got great information here, and there's so much more. And forgive me because we had to kind of skip over a bunch of things and really not drill down, but I want to do more. I want to do a second segment, but you have your own show now. It's called Talks with Tony, and you actually work with a lot of people who have had similar experiences as you have. Could you tell us what are the similarities that you've heard, and what are some of the things like, wow, I never knew that, and how it all kind of comes together and adds up?
Well, it all kind of fell in my lap. So when I started speaking publicly, I would get people through Facebook or email me and start asking me and say, look, I don't want to talk about this publicly, but I think I went through the same thing that you went through. Can we talk? And in the beginning, it was like it would take the place of phone calls or just emails back and forth. People wanted to investigate. People wanted to ask me questions. They were like, skeptical. And I like a good amount of skepticism. It'd be weird if people weren't skeptical.
Of course.
So in the beginning, that's how it happened. But what happened was it really started taking off, and it was like I couldn't keep up with everybody. And I started noticing when I talked to people, I was just, back, they'd ask me questions, I asked them, I was curious. And what I noticed was that similarities kept popping up for people that had radically different experiences. And there's usually something at the 20-year mark. Nobody's a one and done. There's always not always, but there's quite often there's mom, dad, grandpa in the Navy, in the military, or they live near a military base, or they're in Maryland somewhere, or near Montauk, they're in New York. There's a lot in New Jersey for some reason, but I get to talk. So what I found is that you're talking about long-term memory. So, and then this is so my original slideshow when I did live talks is my story. So slides and I say I started here and I went to Peru and I did this and I ended up here, like the whole story from A to B. So now my slideshow is kind of more towards how long-term memory gets recovered, because that's really what I discovered by what I went through and what I've done. And short-term memory works like this. So you have a timeline of your short-term memory. So if I ask you, where were you yesterday morning? Right? You know what I'm saying? When you left the house yesterday morning, where'd you go? You know this because you still have today's memories. You have an address of that time that you left in your mind. It's fresh. So your short-term memory works that way. It works very good. And we use that the most. It's the strongest muscle of memory. Long-term memory doesn't know when you left the house. It just goes, when did you leave your house in the morning? You go, man, I used to leave. Some days I did it this, some days I did that. So your long-term memory is like sketchy. And so what I've discovered is just you can draw timelines. They can say, well, when did it, I always start with like, where were you born? When did it start? What's your earliest memory? Where'd you go to school? What happened? What happened? What happened? And while they're telling me this stuff, I'm writing. And I said, excuse me, when was that? Just roughly. And what I found is that there's usually a pattern gets established that is cyclical. That nobody, and it doesn't matter what, if it's secret space program or just an ET abduction or whatever, angels, all of it. When they talk to me, there's a cyclical pattern. 100% of everybody I've ever talked to, it's not a one and done. Nobody sees a craft or sees an ET, a gray or whatever. Nobody witnesses one and has contact or something in their bedroom, and then it never happens again. It's always a reoccurring theme for them. And because the ETs are not locked to the clock like we are, they can interact with you in 1980, and then they can interact with you in 1990, and then they can go home. It's all one day for them, but it's two separate instances for you. And what I found is that they're locked into time travel is on a 20-year degree or 20-year pattern as well. So when I start asking people things, I can actually predict the next thing that they're going to tell me. So they start telling me, and I go, wait. So tell me about what happened in 2010. And they go, wait a minute, how'd you know? Because it's on a clock. There's a pattern. There's a pattern to all of the contacts. Like in my instance, I was taken in 82, 2002. I had a behavior change. Well, it was like 2000. It's a long story how it works out, but I had it 20 years later. I had a behavior. When I was taken, I had a behavior change. And when the 20 years was up, I had a behavior change. And I found that a lot of people that are in these programs, a lot of these people that are in program that I suspect that are in military programs go through the same thing. They get taken. I was a straight A student. It's over and over again. I was a straight A student. I was the best student. Boom, this happened. My mom had started drinking, and I went to D's and E's. And then later on in life, and I go, what? Then I predict the 20-year mark at the future. I go, what happened? They go, what's funny is that's when I started going. I got a divorce, and I started taking better care of myself, and I went back to school. And you know what I mean? Like you get those kind of life changes, like clockwork for people that have been, involved or
do you get any more contact now, Tony? Is that part of the paradigm?
I should tell you what, I sure hope not.
Okay.
I don't think that I have since 2015. I think when I first started talking about this, I did have contact, and then I got watched. I probably always get watched, and then not only that, but because I speak publicly, every Tom, Dick, and hacker hacks my phone or my email. I get links and I get all that quite a bit.
Last question for you. Terrific job, and thank you so much, and thank you for your patience, because I know you've been through so much, and I find you're a courageous individual, and our listeners, they have to make their own determinations, but your story is incredible, and I have a lot of respect for you. So are you, based on if there's a lot of battles going on behind the scenes, because a lot of things that are happening right now, Tony, as you know, don't seem to make sense to a lot of people, are you optimistic about the outcome?
So yeah, oh yeah, I'm forever the optimist, especially after what I've learned, after what I went through the hard way, that there's always a brighter day to be had. I'm not doom and gloom right now. The world's in a rough place. There's wars. There's a lot going on. I think they're birth pains. I think either way, we got to get a disclosure. And once the cat's out of the bag, there's no stopping it. Like people are going to have to go through a major shift in what our existence is. And no matter what, if the good guys go, and I even hate the term good guy or bad guy. I really, the worst guy is not that bad. His mom loves him, and the good guy is not that great. He's made somebody mad. So you know what I mean? It's a thing about, it's about perspective. So if the better guy wins, we're going to get disclosure, and if the bad guys win, we're going to get disclosure. And there's no stopping where it's going to go. Like mankind is going to advance. But that being said, there are some telltale things. There's some canaries in the coal mine. We're seeing the power has to change. We got to get away from the fossil fuels and just more efficient power use. That's kind of like a requirement to be sponsored by one of these groups, for one. And for me, and this is only my opinion, I'm going to say this with as big a disclaimer as I can, but the canary in the coal mine is cryptocurrency. If they ban crypto, then I think those are the bad guys. And I think if they leave crypto be, it's a currency that works among other species. So you could trade with other worlds cryptocurrency. You can't take all your gold with you. You can't take your $55 billion in gold to to space with you. It's too heavy. You can take $55 billion of cryptocurrency to space, and that's how they trade. It's one method of trade. And so if they take our crypto from us, like what we've seen in China and I believe Russia, then that's somebody that wants to control us and has no intention of letting us into space. So cryptocurrency is a canary in the coal mine.
Okay. Tony Rodrigues, my special guest on Guys Radio. Terrific job. His website is TonyRodrigues with a G.com. His show is called Talks with Tony. Just Google him. You can see him interviewed all over the place. He's doing terrific work. I hope you'll come back again. Thank you so much for being on the show. Great to see you again, Tony.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back. And I got to get you a copy of the book.
All right. I'd love it. Okay.
Robert.
Stay safe. If you enjoy the content and interviews I do each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support me by subscribing to our channels. Thanks so much.